Welcome to the Hybrid Real Estate Professional Podcast, where we dive deep into the intersection of career, family, and finances. Learn the mindsets, tips, and strategies to help you on your personal journey to build a life of abundance and purpose for you and your family. Now here's your host, Aaron Ameen. Welcome back to another episode of the Hybrid Real Estate Professional Podcast. Today, I'm joined by one of my favorite online influencers and real estate investors, Tom Brickman. Tom, who goes by the Frugal Gay 11, is a fan favorite account on Twitter with over 72,000 followers. This interview traces through his 20 plus years as a real estate investor. Tom's story is extremely unconventional. Throughout his career, he worked at movie theaters, retail stores, and also resold cosmetic items on eBay. After building a portfolio of over 20 units, he left his job in 2019 to go all in on his entrepreneurial endeavors. We talked through some crazy stories, like the crack house he bought on eBay for $13,500, how he runs his eBay arbitrage business, and how he finds value where others don't see it. We worked together in this episode to bust a myth that you need a high six-figure job and $100,000 in your bank account to get started in real estate investing. You simply do not. Hope you enjoy the episode. All right, welcome to the Hybrid Real Estate Professional Podcast. Today, I'm joined by one of my favorite online influencers and real estate investors, Tom Brickman. Tom goes by the Frugal Gay 11 on Twitter, and he has over 70,000 followers, and he tells all sorts of amazing stories about his real estate investing journey. So, Tom, I'd love for you to just introduce yourself to the audience in your own words.
It's wild to hear you call me an influencer, but we'll say okay to that. But hey, I'm Tom Brickman. I am a real estate investor from Dallas, Texas. I started buying real estate 20 years ago in Toledo, Ohio, while I was in college. I was 21 when I bought the first one. And I took a job as a movie theater manager in Texas. And I started buying in Texas then, and I kept mine in Toledo. And I headed back to Toledo in the late 2018, 2019s. And started buying more because stuff in Texas just got out of control. Today, I have 22 doors spread out across Dallas, Texas, and Toledo. And I hit financial independence in 2019. I stuck around at my job till January of 2022 out of self-doubt. And real estate pays my bills now.
I love it. That was a very truncated version of your story, which has many chapters buried within it. But yeah, you really have had a resourceful journey in your real estate investing, which is something I'd love to start unpacking a little bit. So first of all, most people don't have the courage or perhaps even the resources to start investing at 21. But what I want to do a quick myth buster right away, right? Which is that most people think you need a high paying salary and $50,000 in the bank account to buy your first rental. But I know you have a different take on that. So can you trace the start of your journey for us?
Absolutely. And I'll say I have a different take, but I do think that you should have a little bit more than I had because I had nothing in my bank when I bought my first rental. My only asset to my name, because I was in college, I was living paycheck to paycheck. My checking account regularly dipped below $100. I was purchasing Gap stock because I worked there and they had this benefit of purchasing Gap stock. So I cashed in all my Gap stock and I used that as my down payment. I put down 10% on a $90,000 duplex, which I had $10,000 in Gap stock, which is mind blowing, but that tells you I was willing to take on lots of overtime while working there to pay the bills. And that's how I bought my first one, was the Gap stock. I lived in the ugly small unit upstairs and I rented out the downstairs. When I went to go just look at a single family, they're like, you can afford like a $45,000 house. And I'm like, oh, that's the garbage. I don't want that. So they're like, if you do multifamily, we can use some of that rent to qualify you for a higher price point property. And I'm like, oh, sign me up for that. So I became a landlord because I wanted lower rent. And with the tenant downstairs paying $600 and my mortgage, tax, and insurance being $738, I was able to get that lower rent until the first winter when I had to replace the furnace.
And remind me, what year was this?
This was 2004, so 20 years ago is when I dove in at 21. I was a senior in college.
Got it. And so you said you put 10% down. It was a $90,000 duplex. You rented out one half. And then you started learning about all the wonders of large CapEx expenses
Right
after your first
off the bat. I remember when the hot water heater too went out, and I'm like, oh my God, this is getting expensive really quick. I went into it blindly, and I would say that if I could go back in time, I would have found a way to get creative before I needed to get creative instead of waiting to panic buy a furnace in the middle of winter in Ohio. Which, when I say I got creative early because I knew I couldn't afford real estate, but I wanted to buy it. So I sold on eBay to pay for college. I sold purses, I sold bras, I sold makeup. And that was really how I grew my portfolio over time because the movie theater job never really paid it. But rewind back to that first winter in Ohio, I didn't have time to sell purses to buy that furnace. So I was taking out loans and borrowing and telling people that they need to pay me back from loans that I gave them that they never paid me back from. So I would just encourage some buffer or some emergency fund before jumping in.
Yeah. So, I mean, would you say you had an entrepreneurial spirit in you from day one? Like, it sounds like you are no stranger to taking some calculated risks and stringing together different income streams and types of businesses. Is that right?
I was raised with the, if you want it, you're going to have to work for it mentality. So I wanted to work at Gap because they did tuition reimbursement. And I'm like, this is great. They'll pay for my college while I work here. Yes, I was always that hustler who will take on a job at a restaurant and I'll go do this and I'll clean and I'll do whatever it takes to get it. And then eBay was just popping up. It was 2004. And I'm like, hey, I'm going to try this. So yeah, I was raised with, I'll figure out a way to make it work because I do want it.
So eBay, I love that you brought that up. And I know you've kept that as part of your repertoire even to this day, right? But explain what role that played in your financial journey and how you've been able to use that to fuel your kind of investment journey.
For sure. When I took the job at the movie theater in 2006 in Texas, I think my salary was $32,000. And when I wanted to buy my first rental in Texas, they're like, you have too much debt. You can't afford anything. And I'm like, all right, what do I need to do this? So I cleared my debt. I cleared my credit card debt. I went and worked at Ross and on the weekends when I wasn't working at the movies. And eBay was my answer to not working at Ross. And it was just, I could flip products. And I started while I was in college and I bought a shopping cart full of purses that were $1.50 a piece. And I sold them 2 at a time on eBay for $60 a piece. And that paid for a semester of college. So that kind of lit the fire of, hey, people in Cleveland, Ohio don't really want these purses, but I bet you there's people around the rest of the US that will pay for these purses and know that there's value to these purses. I use that a lot over the 20 years of buying real estate. I still sell on eBay. I'm more of a passive eBayer than a active eBayer, which means I'm never actively looking for merchandise to try and make a sale, but I list and I sell stuff and flip stuff. And I do eBay arbitrage where if I see someone list something at a really low price, I'll buy it and resell it. And it's just been part of me for the past 20 years.
So you'll do arbitrage by buying items on eBay that are underpriced and then reselling them on eBay at a higher price?
Yes, because there are a lot of times that people don't realize what they have. And you know this from real estate as well. That's part of it. You can buy a property that's poorly. One of my best performing properties was listed as a 1-bedroom and it's a 4-unit and they listed it as a single family 1-bedroom. So people do not know what they have. They throw it up. I pay them what they're asking and then I will bring it back and relist it for what it's worth.
That's actually part of this whole hybrid professional identity brand, right? It's taking skills from one area and applying them to another, in particular real estate. So that whole idea of buying something at a discount or recognizing the true value of something when someone else might not. Yeah, it absolutely maps whether it's reselling items or reselling homes, and just being able to negotiate and buy adeptly. It also sounds like fun, right? If you've got a good eye for that, which I don't when it comes to retail items, if you got a good eye for that and you have some momentum and it's not, a stressful endeavor to you, it sounds like it could be a lot of fun.
This is why I've stayed in my lane and I stay with the products that I know, because you could bring me Nike shoes and I don't know what they're worth, but you bring me like certain colors or certain brands of makeups or shades of foundation and I can tell you all day, like, this is going to sell and this is how much it's going to sell for. I've stuck in my lane. It's not because I wear makeup It's just a very low price point. It's a very small item and it's very easy to ship. So when you buy something for $1 and can turn around and sell it for $20, it's exciting. So that was part of the process. The other thing that I learned, the company that I worked for would buy other movie theater chains or other movie theaters, and they do a ton of refurbishing. Like, they're not going to go in there and spend thousands of dollars redoing something when they can take it down, spray paint it, put it back up. And I learned real quick when I was doing my first purchase in Texas in 2009. I'm like, man, I have $2,000 and this place looks horrible. I'm going to need to figure out how to make this $2,000 work. And there was a lot of taking it down, spray painting it, and putting it back up to make it look better, because I bought a bank-owned foreclosure in 2009, was my first Texas property, and I didn't have the extra money, and I didn't even have the time to do eBay as much, because at that time I was still side hustling at Ross and working at the movie theater, and yeah, it was, how can I make this work?
Did you always have multiple streams of income, like multiple jobs or occupations, like the entire time that you were working before you stepped away from a W-2 job?
For sure. When I left, I left Gap and I went to Target, and I really did not enjoy my time at Target. I loved spending money with Target, but didn't like working there. And I had 6 months between when I left Target and when I started at the movie theater. So I had income coming in from eBay. I had income coming in from rentals, and I just always had different sources. So I was never like, how am I going to make it these 6 months? I kept everything the same. I still had a housekeeper. I still had all these different things going while I wasn't technically working a job in 2006 right out of college, because I had multiple sources. And I knew that hey, I'm going to get rent this day, or I'm going to get this day. And it wasn't as many as I have today, but that was always something with what happens if this dries up? How am I going to pay for this? And this is why I'd rather have 10 things paying me $200 than one thing paying me $2,000, because that one $2,000 could dry up or catch on fire or any of those. So I love having different sources of income because they cover your butt.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a proponent of people, that have a job they love and want to develop along a career track. But I do also think that, when you really boil it down, and you're completely reliant upon a single income stream, and that income stream is, if it's a high salary, you are putting so many eggs in one basket, and there's so much that's out of your control that if you get laid off or if something happens that's unforeseen, you go from 100 to 0 overnight sometimes, and that can be tough. And real estate is the obvious one. Yeah, it makes a lot of people nervous. But so I think it's smart to activate different things and see what works. And maybe if you have 10 ideas, not every one of them is going to work out well, but you try things out. And so for you found this niche within eBay and reselling, and it's okay. I'm good at that. I can keep doing it. It's not a one-time thing. I can find a way to repeat it, and it's become part of your income and what's allowed you to live the lifestyle you want and fuel additional investments, and ultimately let you step away from the parts of the job that you didn't like. So did you, remind me what you studied in college?
Business. So I graduated from the University of Toledo in December of 2005 with a business administration degree.
Nice. And was your thought that you would go get some corporate job where you wear button downs and schmooze it up and have stand-up meetings and all that?
My concentration was in marketing, and I went to a couple of marketing interviews, and I'm like, man, I do not want to do this. This is just too much kiss ass and too much fluff and too much, almost, it's just not my style. And I was not that polished that I wanted to put on a suit ever. They made me wear a suit at the theater, and I hated it. I was so thankful the last 2 years they finally let me take the suit off at the theater. But yeah, I went to a couple interviews during that 2006 spot where I did not have any job, and I'm like, this is not for me.
Yeah, fair. And so let's fast forward all the way to 2018, 2019, the couple years leading up to you leaving and quote retiring, so to speak. So what were you doing then, and what was the tipping point that made you say, okay, I'm done?
So we got to rewind to 2011 or 12. I had some really bad bosses along the way while I worked at this theater, and I worked at different locations around Dallas and Houston. And I just knew that going to another theater or going to another company, I was going to continue to have bad bosses. And at that time, 2011, I'm like, I can buy one of these properties every year, and once I get to 10, it's going to pay my bills. And this was 2011. I had already bought 3 or 4 or 5 at that point, and I just made that a commitment. And by 2018, 2019, when I was ready to pull the plug, like I had more than 10 at the time. I think I had 17 when I left, or 19 or that. I stayed the extra 2 years, and I wish I wouldn't have, but at the same time, I got some really awesome assets in the 2 years that I wouldn't have had access to that really have helped my portfolio grow. I bought a fantastic hoarder house in Dallas in 2020. That was it. All the stars aligned. So it was like I bought that right as COVID was starting. So it was the perfect isolation project where I didn't really have a ton of money to fix it. So I would go over, I had lots of free time, and I'd go over there and I'd have a dumpster and I'd fill it. And then I'd go back, get another dumpster and fill it. It was 11 dumpsters, but I was just nervous. So I stayed those extra 2 years. I got some really awesome assets. I did 2 months of practice before I left where I just lived off of rental income and didn't touch my W-2 income at all to make sure that every bill was being paid. And at that time, every bill was being paid, and I was still able to put like a tiny bit into savings. So I'm like, all right, we can make this work. We can make this work. And I think, in real estate, you can have good years and bad years. I'm doing my 2024 taxes right now, and if I just had my Dallas properties, it'd be a disaster last year. Like they were just draining, and every air conditioner broke, and foundation and this and plumbing and this, and just as I'm doing them. And then like my Ohio ones just held the boat up high there. They just sailed along. Like they had their little expenses, but didn't have anything. So I'm glad that I stayed in those 2 extra years, but I wish I wouldn't have had to go through COVID with the company that I was with.
Yeah, there's a saying, right? People don't quit jobs, they quit bosses. And of course, a bad boss can really taint your experience, even if otherwise maybe the job wouldn't have been as bad. But also, it sounds like you had your eye on, you built methodically this whole real estate portfolio and all these side businesses over a very long period of time. You are literal and by identity frugal, right? So it's not like frugal. You have some runaway lifestyle. You designed this. You built this for yourself, and now you took your chips off the table and you're living the life that you built for yourself. So I think it's really cool.
I want to say, because people just assume that I'm cheap. There is a difference between cheap and frugal. Okay, I still splurge on certain things. We still go out to nice restaurants. We still go on nice vacations. I just look for the coupons and buy them with gift cards and do all those special things. So I think that needs to be said, because I'll get a DM and they're like, "You're so cheap. Like, why wouldn't you do this? Or why are you doing this? Or why are you reusing this appliance?" Guys, there's reasons to reuse or recycle or spray paint a fan because I don't have extra money to go buy a fancier fan. And then there's just cheap trying to haggle with someone over a item at a flea market. If you tell me the price is $10, I'm going to hand you $10 if I want the item and walk away with it. I'm not going to try and be cheap and talk someone down. So I think that needs to be said here, because frugal often gets trampled with cheap, and that is not the case. I'm still living very comfortably and enjoy what I'm doing, and I'm not just sitting over here counting money or listing lipstick on eBay or buying crack houses on eBay, which is a mistake that I made in 2018. I'm enjoying and planning and working on trips that we're going to go on this year. So I think that I know that's a little off topic, but whenever people see frugal, they assume cheap, and that's not the case.
No, I appreciate you making that clarification. I was not under the impression that you were cheap, but it absolutely.
You don't get the DMs that I get. People are like, "You're cheap." No. Whenever I don't want to hire them, and I don't know if you are to the point where you get it, but I get 27 DMs a day of people who are like, "Hey, do you want me to write emails for you? Do you want me to do this? Do you want me to do this?" And then I'm like, "No, thank you." And then they're like, "You're cheap." And I'm like, "No, I'm not. I just don't want you to write my emails. I can write them myself." So yeah.
The audacity, right? Somebody sends you a cold pitch saying, "Hey, will you buy my $3,000 a month ghostwriting package?" You're like, "No, thank you. I'm good." And then they call you cheap. Yeah. Nice.
It comes with a name or the territory. So yeah.
Yeah. So let's speak about that for a minute. So you have over 70,000 followers on Twitter. What is it that first of all, what is it that attracted you to write on that platform? And second, what is it that keeps you going back? And what do you feel like you get out of?
Okay, so March of 21, I knew I was going to be leaving within the year, and I put in my notice in December of 21. And I knew that was coming. And I'm like, what am I going to fill my time with? So I started sharing my journey, and I loved Twitter in March through December of 21. And once I left my job in January of 2022, it really resonated with people. They're like, hey, this dude actually got out of it. He doesn't have to work anymore. He doesn't have to go to this boss that he doesn't care for. And then it became like I got quite a following because people were like, you hit $1 million net worth at 31 while working at a movie theater. And at that time I was making like 55,000 a year. They're like, there's no way. Like, how did you do that? And the before and afters really resonated, which is like one of my favorite things to do, is take something ugly and spend a couple $1,000s and make it nice again. And it's just grown a lot over the last, it's 3 years at this point. And one, I've been able to share with others. Two, I've been able to grow partnerships out of it. Three, I've been able to get inspired and grow other ideas and look at projects that I would never have even looked at. I'll get cold DMs of people trying to sell me properties all the time. And I'm like, I don't want to buy this, but I've never even considered buying it until you DM me. So this is awesome that you've put this on my radar. And I think the movie theater aspect resonates with people, and the average salary, because I never made more than $100,000 a year at my job. But my real estate generates way more than $100,000 a year now because I just put in that time over the last 15 years or so. And I think that is what kind of connects with people. And I try and share the losses. I bought a bad property in 21 because I was bidding against a bunch of people, and I was just emotionally done getting outbid, and I overpaid for it. I did not do a sewer inspection, and then I paid $10,000 redoing sewer lines, and that was something that people can connect with. They're like, yes, I've made the $10,000 sewer line mistake before. Or I've done this. So I bought a property in 2005. I lost a lot of money on it. People connect with that. So I think that's important. My Airbnb was cash flow negative in January, but it's Ohio in January, and who wants to go to Ohio anytime besides the summer? I expected that, and I had a fully occupied Airbnb 2 months prior, so I think that needs to be shared, and I don't think enough content creators who keep sharing the same numbers over and over again are sharing those L's, and I think that's why I picked up and I really grew an audience, because I'll tell you when I'll lose money, and I'll tell you when I mess up, because it happens.
No, I love that about your account. That's what drew me in originally too, is that you have this storytelling tone to your posts, right? You feel like you're participating in a day in your life. You are honest about when things don't go well. And that's something that's missing from most social media. People post their best moments and don't share any of the stuff that isn't perfect. And it creates this false picture. And there's a lot of people in the real estate space in particular that are very guilty of that. They share, oh, look at all this passive income I have. It's all just flowing into my account while I sit on the beach sipping Mai Tais, and that couldn't be further from the truth for pretty much anybody. And if people are posting that, they're probably trying to sell that dream, which is different than the reality of the day-to-day. And so where I want to go with that, because again, you tell your story so well on Twitter, is what are some of these stories where you bought a house or you found something that you're like, it doesn't look very good. The average person doesn't want to buy this, but I see the potential and I'm going to turn it into part of my portfolio. What gave you that eye, and what are a couple examples of that?
So I can tell you a couple of wins and a couple of losses, if that's okay. I want to share at least one loss because I think that's important. Please. A couple of wins. So my Airbnb I bought in July of 22. It was really ugly. It almost looked gray. It's in a historic district. It was really well kept, but it was just ugly. It was gray. It needed a lot. And I went to the owner and I'm like, I want to make you an offer. I'm going to buy this, but will you leave the dining room table? And she's like, I'll leave the dining room table if you will take the piano. And I'm like, I'll take the piano and everything else inside if you want. And she's like, all right, I'll knock $4,000 off if you take all the furniture. And I'm like, mind blown. I'm like, this is an Airbnb and now you've just given me 90% of my furniture and you're going to give me a discount for taking your furniture? Sign me up. I'll take the piano all day long. And that one was an $84,000 purchase that I've put a little bit over $20,000 into it at this point. And just on the 6 months that I rented it last year, it produced $13,000 in those 6 months. And this is a property that would normally rent for $1,200. and people ignored because it was so ugly. But I just got out there and put in the $20,000 worth of work that it needed. And it's like the gem on the corner now. People walk by and they're like, who painted this? How do I stay here? And that was an eyesore for so many years. And that's what people will walk by and say. And when people stay there, they're like, this is really freaking nice. And I'm like, I know it was really nice, but just really ugly. So I think finding those diamonds in the rough that other people ignore has been my specialty for the last 20 years. When I started in Dallas, I bid on a bunch of houses. I think it was like 16 or 17. And I kept getting outbid. And then my realtor, she was an old lady. She's, you know what? She's, you're not going to get anything unless you go for what nobody wants. She's like, why don't you start with the condos? Because they're like giving them away for nothing now. And I'm like, all right, let's sign myself up for a condo. And the investor, she was right. The investors were ignoring them. And at the time I was buying condos for $14,500 or $17,000 or $24,000. And that got my feet wet. That got me in. And you know what? That $14,500 condo I sold for over $100,000 10 years later. And then I turned that $100,000 into 2 multifamilies and kept growing the portfolio that way. So I think looking for what others will ignore because it's ugly and it's the eyesore on the corner has been like my go-to. Now, you don't want to go too ugly, which is what I'll share on one of my losses. In 2021, I was tired of getting outbid. I bid on this property. I won this property for $25,000. It's a rougher neighborhood, a C- neighborhood, which I typically try and stay C or B, which for those listening who don't know, neighborhoods are usually graded by the counties, and it affects your taxes, and it affects the type of tenant that's going to be applying for your property. Majority of my portfolio is C. I have a B and I have 1 D. So that's like my in-betweens. I'm not top of the line and I'm not bottom of the line, but D is pretty rough and hard to manage and hard to find good tenants that want to stay in it long-term. So I stay away from those. And I took this rougher property and I ignored drain lines. And then my plan was, okay, I'm going to buy this side lot from the city for $150 and then I'll sell it as a double lot. As soon as I did that, they're like, hey, your foundation's starting to dip on this side. And they weren't wrong. So that was another $10,000 ding to my budget. So $20,000 went right into unseen features in this house, and then I still had to fix the house. So into this $25,000 house, I'm $60,000 or $70,000 at this point, and I could probably sell it for 60 or 70. But did I plan on dumping that $20,000 into foundation and pipe work? No. And will I see a bump in my resale value because of it? No, maybe because it's working, but in general, people want a great solid foundation. People want pipes. So I think that getting emotional is where I've gone wrong. And at the time in 2021, when I was bidding, 2021, I was tired of getting outbid. The interest rates were like 3% and there's 20 bids on $20,000 houses. So I took a property that I shouldn't have, and I didn't have the correct due diligence, and then I ended up paying thousands of dollars more because I didn't do it right. So I think that needs to be hit home with some of these. One other mistake that I'll share real quick, I did buy a crack house on eBay, unknowingly knowing which street it was on. I'm familiar with Toledo. I'm not familiar with all the streets. I had asked a friend to drive by it while I'm bidding, and she's, yeah, I'll go on lunch. And then by the time she drove by it, I had already won it. And she's, oh, you know where this is, right? And I'm like, no. She's like, it's off of this street. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's this way. And when I pulled off the highway and I came and looked at it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going the wrong direction. I thought it was a different neighborhood, and it was just a lot rougher than what I thought. And I'm not just labeling this as a crack house because we found drug paraphernalia throughout the house. I'm labeling it as a crack house because while my contractor was working on it, there was a drug deal that went bad in our side lot, and then the guy got shot in our backyard. There was a bullet lodged into our window frame of the dining room. Well, he was upstairs. He walked out and there's a guy bleeding in the backyard, and he's, hey, I'm fine, but I had to call the police. They're coming to pick him up. And it was a very wild, emotional property. And I probably should have listened to my dad when he went up to it the first time. He's like, how much did you pay? And I'm like, $13,500. He's like, just walk away. Just lose your $13,500 and don't look back. But I was stubborn and went through it, and we sold it a couple years later. But
what'd you sell it for?
Sold it for 54 and we were 38 total into it at the time. So it was not like a moneymaker and it was not a total dud either. It was just one of those that the tenant really liked it and we ended up doing owner financing for him and sold it to him.
So I'm going to have to ask the question. I know you've told this story before, but anyone who listened this far is going to wonder, how do you buy a house on eBay?
Okay, so it was auction.com advertised on eBay, and you have to pay a $500 deposit just to bid. And you get that back if you don't win the property, but they charge your credit card $500. And I'll be honest, I was at the theater and I was like, I'm ready to buy it. I'm going to buy. And I'm like, man, this is right where I want. And again, it was just on the wrong side of the street. And I just started bidding unknowingly, unfamiliar with the property, unfamiliar with the street. And I won. And so I actually won it for, I think it was 12,000, and then it was 1,500 was the fee that auction.com and eBay got. So it was 13,500 to get the property into my name. It took a couple weeks once I won the bid. You went through a title company, so everything was normal besides like the platform that you were bidding on. I don't know that I would buy another auction.com property because it was a lot rougher. Those pictures were angled certain ways to make it look pretty damn nice. And then you get up there and you're like, oh, they strategically blocked the bullet holes. So I don't know that I would do that, but I have bought on the courthouse steps as well. And I've done really well with that. So I wouldn't discourage auctions all around. I think I just had a dud in the mix of the buying a property on eBay, auction.com.
So it's interesting, right? Because you hear about all these strategies, auction.com, buying at the courthouse, and even just buying in C neighborhoods. And you know that they're good ways to make money. Like people that are studying investing or reading up and want to figure out like, how do I buy undervalued properties? But most people, that is outside of the risk tolerance threshold that most people have. But because you're in at these crazy low price points, 13,000, 20,000, when you were telling the story of, oh, I got so emotional and I was tired of getting outbid and I overpaid $25,000. It's the money coming in from California or the East Coast. It's like they would have paid $50,000 for that house because they think it's a deal, right? So how did you feel like you had identified a market where you could take these risks and it because of the entry points, it was just a little easier to stomach? Or like, how did you develop that risk tolerance and get past it? Because obviously it's paid off for you.
Yeah, I had to early on because I couldn't afford what everyone else was doing. So when I bought an auction property in Dallas. I think it was 2011 or 12. And the property I was waiting for was a condo. It was a very public dispute between the owner and the HOA, and I lived there already. So I knew the history of this and him fighting and not wanting to pay dues. And when I was there, I realized, again, the same thing that my realtor told me 2 years before, like when people were bidding on these houses, they were going for thousands and thousands of dollars worth more than what I thought they should. But at the time, looking back on it, they were great deals. But I knew that those condos were like my sweet spot, and I won that condo for $9,500. So I had to go into what I could afford, and I could afford a $9,500 condo. I could afford a $13,000 house. I did not have the deeper pockets, and I did not have the funding early to buy that more expensive stuff. So that's where my risk was. I'm like, you know what? I bought this $9,500 condo. I remember that I was like, I pulled the cash out. I was an idiot. I took $10,000 in my cargo pant, like my cargo shorts, and I pulled it out of my pocket and I'm handing it to her and I'm shaking. And she's like, you brought cash? And I'm like, yeah, I thought that's all I could do. I don't know how this works down here. And she hands me this handwritten receipt and I'm like, do I get a key? And she's like, no, good luck. So I remember breaking into that condo that first night and taking apart the glass door so we could just slide it far enough to get in. And that's what I had. That's what I could afford. So that's where I started. That was my entry point, and that's what I had available. So that's how I made it work. Going back in time, I wish I could have bought 20 of those condos for $9,500 or $13,000 or whatever they were at that point, but I can't go back in time. But that's all I could afford. So that's what I started with. That's where that risk came from.
Yeah, that's fair. And so obviously once you got a couple of those under your belt, you saw that the world continues, the sun still rises the next day and most problems can be solved, I'm sure then it was easier to do things like that in the future
And
too.
I think in my 20 years, I was nervous at the crack house at one point when I was there. And I do remember one condo that I bought that I would fight with the contractor because no one wanted to take out trash because they were afraid to walk to the dumpster. And I remember I'm like, fine, I'll do it. And I took it and I was just getting real nervous because there were guys standing down there selling drugs. So I think 2 times I've gotten really uncomfortable in my real estate investing over 20 years. But I think that also is what makes it exciting was, first of all, I made that one nice and I ended up, I'm like, I'm too uncomfortable. I don't even want to rent this one. Nobody's going to want to live here. So I sold it and I got a great one when I sold it. I just did an exchange into a great property when I was able to sell that one because it looked really nice for the complex. And I think that also gives you great stories and that you can tell the story about the guy standing by the dumpster selling the drugs while you're trying to just throw away a broken closet door. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I love it. And so how many of these were done with traditional bank financing versus alternative or private money?
In 2009, if I would say less than half were traditional because there was a point where they're like, you have too many doors. You have no business being with us. I remember 2009, I was like terrorized by Bank of America because I had bought 3 doors prior and it was like, just like signing paperwork and nothing. And then the banking crisis happened and I took out a loan with Bank of America and they're like, that underwriter was intense. And I was like nervous by the end. And now looking back on it, I'm like, oh, that was nothing. But I just had not been used to that process because I had bought when I was 21 and again when I was 22 or 23. And it was just a very different process. So less than half. And it's also gotten a lot harder to find banks that will loan below 75,000. So when you're in that price point, traditional isn't always an option. So a lot of what I've done to grow, and this is what some people don't, I'll take 2 $50,000 properties, group them together and get a portfolio loan, which people don't realize, hey, you can't get a traditional loan on it, but a bank with 250,000 will give you a portfolio loan to get your money back out. So I think that's something that should be talked about more freely too, because I think that's part of why some of these smaller towns with these lower price points have so many properties is because banks shun them. They're like, oh, we're not going to make enough on this property. But hey, if you bought the one next door and you rented it out and had income from it, we could do a portfolio loan for you. So I think that there are options. So I would say less than half. I know that's a long-winded answer to your question, but less than half were traditional. I did a lot of all cash and then did cash out on the opposite side, on a big chunk of them.
Part of what I'm trying to have you prove this whole interview is that you don't have to get a high 6-figure job and tuck away $100,000 at a time and buy one house every 3 years. That is absolutely an option, but there are other ways to go about it. There are markets. One of the things that I coach people on and the academy that I started is all about teaching people to invest from a distance so that you can access markets that have affordable entry points. A lot of people that live in coastal markets or more expensive cities can't afford to invest in their own market. And obviously in your case, you lived and had understanding of Toledo, but there are markets like that out there and there are ways to get in and there are other ways to finance properties other than traditional conventional loans. And a lot of it just takes some education and being resourceful, striking up conversations with different people, learning how they've financed their investments. And yeah, just even in the 40 minutes we've been talking, you've already told quite a few stories about how you were able to do that with yours. I want to go into kind of who's on your team. And when I say team, I don't just mean agents and managers, also like your inner circle, your husband, your dad. I think your dad's an investor too, right?
He is. My dad is an investor. My husband is a OCD IKEA cabinet builder. So that's my favorite part of my husband. No, I'm just kidding. But he loves to put together IKEA cabinets and can do it in his sleep at this point. In addition to my dad is an investor, but was never an investor when I was growing up. He had one rental when I was growing up. He grew it more once I was out of the house and my brother was out of the house. He started growing a smaller portfolio, basically back in 2008, 9, 10, and has grown a little portfolio up in Ohio. but isn't quite as aggressive, or he doesn't take the risks. Like, he would not buy that crack house on eBay. Like I said, he'd walk away from it. In addition to that, I think that having strong boots on the ground is super important. Having multiple realtors that you can lean on, having multiple different people that you can lean on for. Even having a good title company is like a breath of fresh air sometimes, and people don't understand that. And I've struggled with deals because they've gone to a bad title company and they're like, we can't get this. And da, da, da. I'm like, I just bought it in cash and this title company closed it. They're like, then go back to that title company. And so I've stuck with the same 2 title companies in each state because they can get deals done. And it's not that they're doing they just are a little bit easier to work with. And that can make or break a deal. And same with lenders. Once I formed relationships in both states with credit unions, like my portfolio, they're like, oh yeah, we can do this. They were so receptive. So I think that your team, beyond your husband building IKEA cabinets my dad, I would say, has been on my team. Like, he'll come and help me paint, or he'll come in, my dad one time did do a bra run for me at this one store. I'm like, can you pick up these? And it was so funny because I'm like, Dad, I told you the brands to get. And he kept picking up the wrong ones just to annoy me. He's like, do you want this one? And I'm like, no, put it down. Just get these. And so my dad has definitely been there. He's helped paint, but I don't know how much more he has done with my real estate. He's helped. I think he came down during the hoarder house, and I've helped him when he bought a hoarder house. And I've also helped him. He had some squatters in a property and did not have a property manager in place. So I helped him clean that up before. But I think some of those, I can tell you, if I didn't have good landscapers, that hoarder house would have been 100 times harder. And I had 2 landscapers from 2 different companies working on 2 sides of the house just because it was so bad. So I think building up a solid team of landscapers, lawyers, property manager, title company, all of those things are going to help you get there. And I was a terrible landlord 20 years ago when I started. I had no idea what I was doing. Like, I was winging it, and I would take bounce checks all the time from this one tenant. And I'm like, I'm too broke to be paying $20 extra or $30 extra every time you bounce a check. And then the next month I'm an idiot and take another check from her and it bounces. And I'm like, okay, I need to figure out something better than taking another bounce check from this person and get this person out of my house because they're not paying me. I think that building a team is important, and I'm trying to think of who I'm forgetting off of my team, but I can tell you.
So do you have a primary property manager in both markets?
So I self-manage in Texas, and I have a contract employee in Ohio. So I have just 2 doors with a property manager in Ohio, and then I have 14 with the contract employee.
A lot of people are afraid, I don't know if afraid's the right word, but they're nervous about the idea of self-managing, especially if it's remotely. And so what would you say is your trick to keeping a handle on things, especially when you can't have eyes always on these
So
properties?
that hourly employee saves me so much. And it's stuff that, and I'm not saying saves me money, but like, we'll drive by it. Like, I got a letter from the city and they're like, why is this overgrown? And they went over and pulled trash and did that, like that type of stuff. Property management's going to charge you a lot more money, and they're going to get to it a lot slower than when you have a contract employee who punches in and gets paid a certain amount of hours. They want to get paid. So I think boots on the ground is your best asset, and use whoever you can. If you can't find anyone else, can you use your landscaper? Can you use anyone? And in Toledo, my first good contractor was my plumber. And then since he was good, and I started with him, and then I'm like, okay, do you know anyone that does electric? Do you know anyone that does this? And I started building a team that way because he was the only one that would respond to me. So I started with a plumber, and 20 years later, I still use the same plumber. I know he's not the cheapest, and he does keep his trip charge low for me. He keeps it at that 2007 rate, but he is definitely not the cheapest. But he was my first on my team, and he showed up for me. He's met the city inspector when we've had this issue or done this, even though it's not necessarily a plumbing issue. And I think that's important. So the more people that found people through web forums and Facebook groups, and that, it just makes it easier for you. And I think that needs to be hit home, because you can't just go putting all your eggs in one basket with one property manager and hope that everything's fine. Find a couple people. So if something goes sideways, you've got this person to lean on, or this person to lean on, or that.
As somebody who's gone through 3 property managers in one market, I can attest to the fact that you definitely don't want to be too dependent on just your property manager, because God forbid, for whatever reason, you have to pivot. You want to have some of your own connections and be able to manage that transition. I definitely learned some lessons the hard way on that front. No, and I love the idea of having you find someone, they respond to you, they do good work for you, and you reward them by continuing to work with them. You ask them, who are the people you work with that do these other things? And that's a nice organic way to build a reliable network. And you, having many properties, you give them a lot of work too. And I want to actually even touch back on one thing you said earlier. You bought that house on the corner that you said it used to be this big eyesore, and now people walk by it and they even have reaction about it. That, hey, this looks really cool. That type of revitalization makes a huge difference in a community, right? People appreciate that stuff. And so not only, again, are you contributing by employing people in that area, but you are revitalizing, right? And I think you and I have cross-posted on Twitter about this sometimes. Like, people villainize landlords and make them sound like evil, heartless people. But there's a lot of contribution that comes from people that buy investment properties into communities. Not all of it's positive. There's plenty of people that do take advantage. There's plenty of people that don't seem to have a lot of heart. But I would not say that's the majority. I'd say the majority are more people like you, and I'd like to think like me, who are more mom and pop, and they do understand the other side of the table, what it's like to be a tenant.
I bought one in August of 22 for $25,000 also, and it was just a really ugly house. And I get the most compliments on it, and I get the most negative comments on it, where people are like, you took that from a first-time home buyer. And the reality of it is that sat on the market for 4 months. It was a bank-owned foreclosure. It was super ugly. Nobody wanted it when it was on the market. So I didn't take it from anyone. It sat there for 4 months. I threw in a low offer and surprised me that the bank came back. They're like, all right, we want it off the books. And then I put in the work. Like, people just either want it all or don't want it at all. And that house, nobody wanted, but now it looks really good and it's in the right spot. And I just put in the work and made it look nice. And I think that's where I hate you're a slumlord, landlords are terrible comment that I get constantly, because the reality of it is the majority of the stuff that I'm buying is not turnkey. I can't even tell you the last time I bought even my own house wasn't like quite turnkey. And I put in that work, that effort, that time, and pick the tile and pick the colors and do all this stuff that a lot of the people just don't want to do. And then I get labeled a slumlord for it. So that's the fun of social media, is the people that want to blame others instead of just putting in the work, because anyone could have bought that over the 4 months that it sat on the market. But the reality is nobody wanted it because it was ugly, and I was the one that decided to just put in the work and make it look nice.
People on the internet love to hate.
Productive.
Exactly. But with that said, though, there are a lot of quality people on the internet. Obviously, you and I met that way, and there's a ton of other people in the real estate space that do what we talked about earlier. They share their stories, ups and downs, and they converse and engage with each other. And there's I think, a very positive, vibrant real estate community on Twitter in particular.
I have learned a lot. So I would say from my 3 years of being on Twitter, I've found some solid connections. I've learned a lot. There was so much that I've learned over the last 3 years that I wish I would have known 10 years ago that they've been doing or that they're doing, because they do it a lot easier. I'm the one who's still out there like doing the demo and cleaning out and not doing this. And I think that there's some awesome people that I've met that aren't even in real estate, but I've just met through Twitter. So I love tomorrow I'm going to Austin to hang out with a couple of other content creators and just hang out for the day, and they're all real estate investors. And that would not be something that I would be doing if I weren't on Twitter sharing my story. So I think that there's a lot of pros, but there are some haters out there too.
Yeah, and they're not going to go anywhere, unfortunately. They're still going to be there no matter what, but at least there are a lot of quality connections that rise to the top. And remind me, do you work with other investors or coach or do anything like that?
I do coaching. I just dropped a free guide that is in all of my social media. So I'm at the Frugal Gay 11 on Twitter, on Instagram, on TikTok. And I have a free guide, which is just all the questions that I get DM'd constantly. I just put together a list with a lot of things to get people's feet wet. So I have coaching, I have a course, and I work with other investors so I'm doing, sounds like a lot of what you're doing also.
Yeah. What kind of stuff do you JV on? What are you looking for when you work with other investors?
Okay. So the real answer is I'm looking for someone that I actually want to work with or that I'm comfortable with. Because there's a lot of people that are like, let's JV. And I'm like, I don't want to do business if you're talking to me this way right now. And I'm not looking for boots on the ground, because when I did a JV with boots on the ground, I was wildly disappointed because I'm like, you're there, and why am I getting this in Texas, and you're not taking care of this, and I'm hearing about this, and I'm hearing about this, and this isn't getting done. I'm more looking for capital usually, but I don't have a shortage of it, so that's a positive as well, that I'm not like always looking for capital.
So how much of the capital that you have access to now through your network came through Twitter?
6 or 7 doors, and it's people that I've worked with or people that have hired me for coaching, and they're like, can you deal analyze with me? And I'm like, this is a garbage deal. Don't buy this house. Look at this. What if you did this? And they're like, oh yeah, that does make more sense. And I'm like, stop over. And that's what I'm seeing a lot. There are turnkey services, which you know, but you pay a huge premium when you use these turnkey services. And a lot of times if you're buying in a value market like Ohio, it takes a long time for that appreciation to catch up unless you're in Columbus. So I think that turnkey is great for those that can't do it, but it's not always a great option in value markets because you could be underwater for 10 years trying to catch up what you overpaid for that turnkey service. So that's a lot of what I've learned over the last 3 years as well, because I didn't even know what turnkey was. I was always just buying crack houses on eBay. So I didn't know that turnkey services were until a client, can you analyze these with me? And I'm like, yeah, that's 20,000 more than it should be because it looks pretty. This is the same one on the same street with one more bedroom and it's 20,000 less. Let's go after this one. Yeah.
I love it. Again, the point I was trying to illustrate there is that you put yourself out there, you tell your story, and people gravitate towards engaging with you, and you build these connections, and it can even lead to stuff like partnerships, capital partners, JVs, and just great relationships too. A lot of people, whether they charge for
all over the world, like when I did free intro sessions at first, and I would get on a call, no idea who I'm about to talk to, and they're like, I'm in and it's a country I've never even heard of. And I'm like, where is that? I've never even heard of that one. So I love that connection as well, that you meet a lot of cool people in a lot of different countries doing the same thing that you're doing, just in different ways. And that's another awesome aspect of social media.
I love it. I'm being conscious of the time here. I know we've been chatting for a while. You've got probably 10 more hours worth of stories we could dive into, but I'll have to have you back on. I've really enjoyed this. I appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. I think we already alluded to this, but just drop your handles and where people can find you again so they can reach out.
I'm at the Frugal Gay 11 on Twitter, on Instagram, and TikTok, and thefrugalgay.com. And I hang out most on Twitter, and DMs are open. Thank you.
Awesome. I will include all that in the show notes, and we will get some people reaching out to you for mentorship, JVs, all that jazz. And thank you so much for what you do. And we will have you back soon.
Thank you. Bye, guys.